At the 2021 NBA trade deadline, the Chicago Bulls made a bold move in pivoting from being a rebuilding team looking to develop their young talent and pushing to start winning now and building around Zach Lavine, who they knew likely would leave the organization as a free agent if they did not make swift moves to get him the requisite talent. And that kicked off by making one of the biggest trades of that deadline when they acquired then-star big man Nikola Vucevic from the Orlando Magic in exchange for Wendell Carter Jr. and 2 first-round picks. And while a lot of Bulls fans praised the move at the time, as Vucevic was coming off the best season of his career, the Bulls desperately needed a starting caliber center. You had people talking about how this was finally a franchise acting like a big market team and being aggressive and getting big names. That is, until it didn't work. And while I do think Vucevic gets more blame than he deserves for the Bulls' failures and is often a scapegoat and easy target for Bulls fans because of the amount the Bulls had to trade to get him, but the fact of the matter is, it did not work. The Bulls lost the trade, and there's no getting around it. But here we are over 3 years later after the trade, and the Bulls going into a critical offseason that will define their future, an offseason in which we were promised change. The question now remains, will Vucevic be on the team going into next season? And I've seen a lot of Bulls fans and even some of you in the comments saying, well, Vooch has to go. Getting rid of him needs to be a priority over even trading Zach Lavine or letting DeMar DeRozan walk. Well, simply put, it's not that easy. And if anything, the guy is most likely going to remain with the Bulls next season among the mid-3, and that's going to be Nikola Vucevic. So Bulls fans better prepare themselves for that, and I'll explain why in this video. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. And I'm sure most of you saw the news by now that the Bulls have found and hired their new lead assistant to replace Chris Fleming and Wes Unseld Jr., who was the head coach of the Wizards for 2 seasons before being fired this past season for their abysmal start. I didn't think this news warranted an entire video for itself, so I thought I would touch on it here briefly, but as you all know, it was reported that Billy Donovan was looking to hire a new lead assistant who had head coaching experience. Initially, it was believed that Josh Longstaff would take on that role until he got a job to be lead assistant over in Charlotte. And while I'm sure some were kind of looking at this like, really, the guy who was coaching that horrible Wizards team and got fired 2 seasons into the job? Well, I think we can all agree that that Wizards roster was absolute crap, and no coach was going to be taking that team to a lot of wins. And so in short, I actually like this hire. Unseld is a pretty well-respected coach throughout the NBA with extensive experience as an assistant. He spent 6 years on Mike Malone's coaching staff with the Denver Nuggets before taking the job with the Wizards. Before that, he was an assistant with the Magic, the Warriors, and the Wizards before that. Obviously grew up around the game as his dad is a Hall of Famer, so I'm not saying that this is a game-changing hire, but it's better than what I would have expected when I initially thought there was no chance the Bulls would be able to land a lead assistant with head coaching experience. So a good move. We'll see what he brings from a player development and leadership standpoint. Now back to Nikola Vucevic and the desire for fans across Bulls Nation for the franchise to do everything in their power to trade Vooch, which again, I don't think is entirely fair, but that's where fan sentiment is right now. Now, here's the problem when it comes to trying to trade Vooch. If you thought there was no market for Zach Lavine, you can essentially double that for Vucevic and the lack of market there is for him right now in a trade. See, while Vucevic's overall salary is much less than Zach's, where Vooch is making half the amount that Zach is at $20 million, and despite the fact that Vooch only has 2 more years left on his deal compared to 3 that Zach Lavine has, you have to understand that 1, Vucevic is 33 years old. He's actually going to be 34 by the time the season kicks off. He's clearly declining as a player overall, and more importantly, you have to look around the league and see which teams are in the market for a starting center. Because even as much as some might say, well, Vooch should just come off the bench for some other team, he's not going to do that. He's still too good. He's good enough on offense to not be a player that should be coming off the bench. And even further to that, I mean, teams aren't going to be willing to trade for a $20 million a year player to come off the bench. If you trade for Vucevic, you're going to have him start on your team. And so really, when you look around the league, looking at the standings from this past season from top to bottom in each conference, go through each of the teams and ask yourself, is that a team that would be in the market for a center, and a center that fits their timeline? Because sure, you could say, well, the Wizards could use a center after trading Daniel Gafford. Yeah, maybe the Hornets, who have never really had a good big on their roster, but Vucevic on those teams makes no sense. They're not going to trade for a 34-year-old big who isn't going to be part of their long-term future. So I was going around team by team and thinking which team realistically could be in the market for a starting center. Not even just for Nikola Vucevic per se, we'll put him aside for now, but just looking for a starting caliber center in general. And it is honestly so few teams that I almost felt defeated as a Bulls fan and learned to accept that Vuce is going to be on this team for the foreseeable future, at least for next season. Maybe they might be able to move him for minimal value as an expiring deal next offseason, but there is quite literally no market for Nikola Vucevic this offseason. In my view, there are really only two teams that could be in the market for a center, teams where Vucevic could make sense on given their timeline and their needs at the 5, and that's the Phoenix Suns and the Golden State Warriors. Now, initially, I had some other teams in the mix as well. I thought, well, maybe the Pelicans would have some interest because they're rumored to be shopping around Jonas Valanciunas, and maybe you could see Vuce for a Valanciunas swap, but Val and Vuce are more or less redundant players. And if the Pelicans are looking to move on from Valanciunas, what value are they going to extract from Nikola Vucevic that they weren't already getting from Valanciunas? They're obviously going to be looking for a center that is more mobile, athletic, and can spread the floor, which Vuce is none of those. And then I also thought, well, maybe the Hawks if they look to try and trade Clint Capella, but the Hawks are so bad on offense, the last thing you want to do is take away one of your better defenders and replace him with Vuce. So the Hawks route. So that really just leaves the Suns and the Warriors. Now, if I'm going to be honest, I think the Warriors would be the best fit overall and one that would work out for both sides because the Warriors, who have shown interest in Caruso in the past, they could actually offer the Bulls a nice value package if Vuce comes with Caruso in a trade deal. I also think that, unlike the Suns, Vuce would fit well from a playmaking standpoint and acting as a hub on the interior for their overall offense, something Warriors value with their heavy ball movement and playing off ball. And it would give the Warriors some actual size for once. Yeah, they've had Kevon Looney, they've had some other lower tier centers like Zaza Pachulia or that one season where they had Cousins and then he got injured. Like, they've never had an actual starting caliber center on their roster. Even Looney fell out of the rotation last season. So I honestly like the fit there the best, especially when we know the Warriors are still going to be trying to maximize Steph still playing at a high level and trying to win a championship, even though we know that ship has sailed. Now, for the Suns, the reason I don't like the fit as much is probably because I'm a little biased and know that if Vucevic is traded to the Suns, it likely means that Nurkic is going to be a Chicago Bull. And if you got frustrated with Vucevic and his effort at times, then you're going to be seeing more of the same thing from Jusuf Nurkic. Yeah, Nurkic is a little younger. He's going to be turning 30 this summer. He's on a slightly more favorable contract. Like Vucevic, he has 2 years left on his deal, but instead he's making $18.1 million and $19.3 million respectively in those final 2 years. But really, it's pretty negligible. And because they have very similar skill sets, Vuce is a better scorer, but Nurkic probably a better defender and rim protector, even though that's not saying much. And so I don't like it for the Bulls. But even for the Suns, I mean, Vucevic has struggled playing with guys who are ball dominant and play heavy ISO basketball. We've seen that with DeMar and with Zach, and you can sense his frustration by it as well. But if you thought those guys were bad, try having him be on a team with Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal, and see what kind of opportunities you're going to get there. It's going to be the same scenario for Vucevic, if not worse, with more limited touches and shot attempts and a slow-paced style of basketball. Now, I could see the Suns maybe going for it and trying to acquire Vucevic for Nurkic because they're desperate, and it's clear Ishbia has no idea what the hell he's doing, so he probably sees Vucevic and thinks, hey, a bigger name than Nurkic, scored 18 points per game last season, 11 rebounds, passes just as well as Nurk. Yeah, this is probably the guy that can get us over the top. So yeah, I would not be surprised if they try and make a push for Vucevic. But yeah, I mean, outside of really just those two teams, you can't sit here and tell me that any other team around the association is going to be interested in trading for a 34-year-old declining Nikola Vucevic who's going to be making $20 million for the next 2 seasons. I don't see it happening. So like I said at the beginning of the video, I've mentally prepared myself that Vuce isn't going to be going anywhere. And that change, real change to this team, outside of maybe trading Zach Lavine for pennies on the dollar, is probably unlikely. But let me know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.